yours yesterday, certainly one that people are hoping will give a shot in the arm to the economy. Just take us through the thinking behind that which you announced yesterday, particularly as regards the lack of requirement for people coming back double vaccinated from amber list countries to isolate.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, up until now, if you've gone to an amber list country, well, for a start, we said you shouldn't be going there for holidays, but you also had to come back and you had to quarantine or self-isolate. What we did yesterday, on the basis of the fact that we now have such a large proportion of people fully vaccinated, it said if you have been fully vaccinated, then you can essentially travel from the 19th of July to an amber list country without needing to come back and quarantine. You'll still need to come back and take a day 2 PCR test, but that will, of course, open up a large number of countries which fall into that amber category, by far the biggest group between the red, amber and green. So good news for people who are looking forward to maybe seeing loved ones abroad or even catching some sun.
What though of loved ones who live abroad and come back here? As you say, you're talking about people who are fully vaccinated, but fully vaccinated via the NHS. I think at the moment there are around about 30 countries that accept our certification. Why won't we accept anyone else's?
Well, that would be phase 2 of it, and something we're very actively working on at the moment. Of course, with the UK vaccination programme, you're able to demonstrate your vaccine status very easily. The full NHS app, that's not the COVID app, I should point out, it's the regular NHS app contains your record for your vaccines. So once you've been fully vaccinated, it effectively gives you a certificate which you can show on screen or download. So it's easy for us to be able to use that in order to demonstrate the status for somebody returning home. That's the first stage. The next thing is to be able to recognise apps from other countries or certification from other countries, easier done from some places like the EU, where they have a digital app coming along, than it is in the United States, where they have, I think, 50 different systems, one for each state, largely paper-based. So there's some complexities to work through there. But this is phase 1, and we hope to follow it up quickly with double vaccinated people from other countries coming here.
Can you put some sort of time frame on that? Because clearly a lot of people are looking forward to your announcement yesterday. They may well have some time off coming in the summer. There are an awful lot of expat Brits wanting to come back to the United Kingdom to see their family. Do you think you're going to be able to have this done, next couple of weeks, next couple of months, by the end of the summer?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, this announcement kicks in from the 19th of July for anyone who's been vaccinated in the UK. And then secondly, we're actively working on this issue of how to accept vaccinations from other people. Obviously, we'll look at whether they are World Health Organization certified and the like. I would think in terms of timescale, in the next couple of weeks, I'll be able to come forward and say more about other locations in the world.
His girlfriend's in Canada. She had her first jab here. She got her second jab in Canada. What does that mean for her ability to come back into the UK quarantine free?
Yes, I mean, Canada is one of those countries where we've yet to get us a bilateral exchange in place for recognising each other's COVID certifications. And that situation is a bit more complicated again, because, as you say, it's one in each location. One of the many issues that we're working through, and it sort of slightly answers your first question as to why we're not able to instantly recognise people travelling in that sort of situation. I should point out none of this is actually in place until the 19th of July.
Yep.
So you have to be fully vaccinated, plus wait 2 weeks, because that's how long you have to wait until they're fully sort of activated.
So even if the jabs in the countries that we've been talking about here are ones that are given in the UK, it's still going to take some time, isn't it? Is it, for those jabs to be recognised, which feels very odd to people? Why can't you just go, yep, we're jabbing with Moderna, you're jabbing with Moderna, and you come?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, you make a very good point. You understand that wouldn't immediately appear in the NHS app for obvious reasons. And then there has to be another system in place, therefore, to be able to acknowledge somebody's vaccinated status. It needs to be automatic. It needs to work with the passenger locator form. Border Force would need to be able to recognise it. There are just complexities to work through to get to that situation. And it's one of the things we'll be working on next, having only just in the last day announced that we're going to be able to accept accept amber list returnees without quarantine.
So I get.
Do you understand, though, the frustration of expatriate Brits? For example, living in Italy, this weekend, we're going to see around about 1,000 Italian fans coming to this country to watch the football and then heading straight back home afterwards. There will be thousands of people looking at that and saying, well, why can't we do the same? People who perhaps haven't seen their families for the best part of a year and a half.
No. I mean, look, we want to be able to open that up for people, and actively working on it. I should say, with the football, they come to a specific location. They're taken direct to the football. They leave again 12 hours later. They're unable to travel anywhere else, etc. It's a very restricted program. But nonetheless, I'm going to take the point. I think we do want to get this done. Part of the issue, of course, is elsewhere, the level of fully vaccinated people tends not to be at the levels that we've got in the UK, because we got on with our vaccination program so much faster. So, there aren't as many fully vaccinated people, for example, from Europe to come here. But nonetheless, we are working on it. We do want to get this part of it resolved as well. I thought it was important with this phase 1 section, people who've been vaccinated in the UK, to get that information out there as soon as we were ready to make the announcement, which is why I did that yesterday. But I said we'll follow up with phase 2 for people coming the other way as soon as we can.
A caller earlier who wants to get to his daughter's wedding, hasn't got long left, has been triple jabbed by jabs that are recognised in this country, but will still have to quarantine. Why?
Yeah, so the first thing we've done is to enable people who've been vaccinated here, where they can show the status on the NHS app. That's the full NHS app as opposed to the COVID one, or dial 119 and get a piece of paper. And from the 19th of July, we're saying that if you're coming back from an amber list country like France, for example, you would be able to not have to quarantine and simply take a day 2 test. That's stage 1. That's phase 1. We do want to be able to recognise World Health Organization recognised jabs which have been provided elsewhere, and it's actually just a question of our coming to agreements to be able to recognise their version in Europe called the Digital Pass, in order to be able to do the same in return. So I'm hoping to be able to return pretty quickly to be able to do that. Easier from some places than others, because in America, for example, there are 50 different systems, one for each state, and it's largely paper-based. So there are more complexities to that.
How long
easier for the EU.
Understood that, but how long is pretty quickly, particularly for Europe?
Yeah, I don't have a date for you now, but
Okay.
I'll come back and let you know as soon as I do.
Are we talking weeks
but we're
or
working
months?
closely on it. Oh, weeks. Yeah.
Weeks. Okay, so it could be within the next month or so. You've got some better news for those families.
Yes, absolutely. And look, the total logic is on the side of that. I just thought that since we have already established that we can do this with the NHS app, and we can integrate that into our systems for borders, that we ought to get on with doing that now, rather than and announce it now, rather than keep people in suspense.
How long will quarantine exist for those who aren't jabbed, for those who either choose not to take it or can't?
Well, so for the time being, we're saying anyone who's been fully jabbed won't need to quarantine from this amber list, and you already didn't from green. You will still need to if you haven't had both vaccinations. Of course, people are getting those very quickly. We've done amazingly well as a country in terms of people becoming vaccinated. Actually, this is another call to people to go and get your vaccination. There'll be a subset of people who are either on clinical trials or, for whatever medical reason, can't get vaccinated, and of course those special categories will
We've made it a free
charge
choice
case
for people not to take the jab. They will say, well, I've been given a choice, I don't want to take it, and now you're creating a 2-speed, 2-tier society by doing this.
Well, I'd say on behalf of everybody else who has had their jab, if it's simply a matter of choice not to get it, that I'm afraid this is a price that you would need to pay. You'd need to carry on quarantining, and that's to protect everybody else. There's no reason not to get this jab. It protects people. It protects yourself. It protects other people's lives. As a society, we have less vaccine hesitancy than any other country in the world, and I think we should all be very proud of that.
Just fine. I get the NHS app and I can show that I'm double jabbed. Who do I show it to? At what stage of my travel do I show that?
Before you get on the carrier, usually the airline, unless you're coming back from France, where it could be the train or the ship. And that means that you won't be able to board unless you can demonstrate that status. And in order to accept that, they'll look for the NHS app, or people will be able to dial 119 and get a paper version.
So as well as showing the passport to the nice person before you get on the plane, you show the app as well that says I've got 2 jabs, yeah?
That's it. You need to actually demonstrate that you've carried out a pre-departure test in the country you're coming from, that you've filled out a passenger locator form, that you've booked your day 2 test, and if you're not going to be quarantining, that you've been double jabbed and waited 2 weeks. Now that all sounds very complicated, but actually it will probably work it does. So most people, when they book in, when they check in, they check in online, and it will probably work online because that's how the carriers will ask for the information.
And you might. What stops people from doing what I'm afraid some people have been doing to get past the checks at Wembley, which is screenshot someone's COVID app double jab status, share it around, and have it on their phone to show people?
Yes, you won't. Of course, you won't be able to do that because your passport has to link up with your with you. So you can't show somebody else's COVID status and provide that information. Usually, I know that British Airways and Virgin, for example, have said they're going to automate this as part of their check-in process. So probably you'll do it before you get to the airport, but you won't be able to upload incorrect information because it's matched against your passport.
If people have deleted it from their phone, they're unlikely to be putting it back on. It just feels like we might have missed the boat on this one.
That's not actually the evidence, by the way. We're still seeing lots of people downloading the app. We encourage people to do so. As I say, we'll keep the sensitivity of it under review to align with the new recommendations that come in, guidelines that come in on the 19th of July. So we'll continue to do that. It is a very useful tool in the army, and no one wants to get long COVID. No one wants to get COVID and pass it on to somebody who becomes seriously ill or worse, dies. So it's in all our interest to carry on using every tool that we've got to defeat coronavirus. And the app will remain an important part of our armoury to do that. And we encourage people to carry on using it in the same way as we encourage people to keep applying common sense, all the things we know about, better outside than indoors and all the rest of it. And the app's another part of that armoury.
The rationale for asking for a PCR test from children as young as 5-6 years of age.
Yeah, so first of all, I should point out that children, 18-year-olds and under 18, of course, children, will be able to follow the same rules regardless of whether they've been double vaccinated. And of course, the answer is they won't have been double vaccinated because currently the Joint Committee on Vaccines and Immunisation have not recommended yet vaccinating children. We're waiting for them to opine on it. So we thought it was right and proper, because they can't be vaccinated, to allow them to adhere to the same rules. But we must, of course, make sure that we've got protection for everybody in the United Kingdom in place. And a PCR test remains the best way to do that. And it does mean that we're able to then keep a very close eye on those variants of concern, which are, of course, the thing that we are most worried about now. We don't want to put the country at risk, and that could be carried by a child as well. So that's the reason why we're doing it, and this is the reason why everybody will still have to take a PCR test on day 2 when they return.
You mentioned a couple of minutes ago the NHS COVID-19 app, and I'm presuming actually will have had conversations about this with people in your own department about the concerns that when we get into the summer and we see, as the Health Secretary outlined, cases perhaps running as high as 100,000 new cases a day, perhaps even higher than that, that we are going to be in a position where we are seeing potentially millions of people, and certainly not the majority of them with COVID-19, but millions of people being forced to self-isolate. What action is being taken on the app at the moment?
Yeah, that's right. I take advice on this, or we take advice on this from the medical experts. And as things like the overall nationwide levels for things like the amount of distance that you need to keep, the social distancing and other rules are looked at, so will we look at the way that the app performs with regard to what are now the new standards being in place. So we always keep a very close eye on those sort of things. I did speak to the Health Secretary about it yesterday. He's very aware of this, and we'll keep it under constant review because we want the app to be a useful tool in our armoury to make sure that we're all able to be aware of and ultimately defeat the coronavirus, and we want it to continue to work in that way.
Let me ask about red list countries, given the changes that are coming to amber and the double jab. Are Brits who travel to red list countries going to have their hotel fees subsidised if they can't afford them?
No, Brits shouldn't be travelling to red list countries. I should make very, very clear. They're red lists for a reason. The only people who should be coming back from them are British or Irish citizens or people with permanent residence in the UK returning. So we shouldn't continue to see people travel out to red list country. Certainly not for
But even,
holidays.
I mean, the
And
lawyers have stepped in this, as you know, Mr. Shapp. The lawyers have said that this is discriminatory. It is unfair on those people who might have very, very good family reasons to go. It might be a dire crisis. They cannot afford to stay in the hotels. It would cripple them financially. So they need state support. They need that subsidised. You're saying no.
Look, I'm afraid we do have to do the things which protect the country from importing potentially serious versions of the variants of the virus, and we ask people not to go to those countries. Where they do and they come back and they hotel quarantine, I have to tell you that overall the system's already being subsidised, and if anything, the system may have to look at the overall cost of the system. We're not encouraging people to go to red list countries at all.
Does that mean?
and they
Sorry. Does that
shouldn't
mean
be
that the
going.
price could go up for people who are having
Potentially, yes.
Right.
Yeah, and
What would it
we're
go up
not.
to?
People. Look, I'm simply saying. You asked me, should it be subsidised? The answer is actually it's already subsidised. We do not want people to be travelling to red list countries. When in fact the only people who should be coming here are people who already are there but are returning nationals, essentially.
Brief and about public transport. Over the past couple of days, you will have seen a number of groups that are interested, perhaps representing those who are immunosuppressed, representing people who were in the vulnerable category before. The removal of the mandating of masks on public transport is petrifying vulnerable people up and down the country. What would your advice be to those that have to travel by public transport who fall into that category? Would you simply say that they should travel off peak?
Yeah, for a start, we'll still be issuing guidelines. And as with everything to do with coronavirus, similar to the conversation we're just having, we've been living with this for a year and a half now. People know the things to do in order to try to keep themselves safe. And it's still sensible to wear a face covering if you're on a crowded piece of transport, a crowded tube, for example. But clearly, if you're on a train, perhaps a long distance service, there's no one else in the carriage, it's not really protecting anyone. And we're able to now shift to people using their own common sense increasingly as we get through the 19th of July and asking people to do that. So I think it's right that we switch these things from the law to guidance. But nonetheless, that doesn't mean that we're not guiding people to be sensible and to think about how they can protect themselves and others, but recognizing the fact that the majority of adults have now been double vaccinated, and of course reminding people to come forward for their vaccinations and their final vaccination if they've had the first one.